constructive criticism is, I think that's the best way to become a better photographer. Like better at anything, not just photography, better at anything is to be able to get constructive criticism feedback and be able to apply that as well.
Hey, welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast brought to you by CloudSpot, the easiest all-in-one solution for photographers to deliver and sell your photos online. We got another community spotlight interview coming at you today. This is my opportunity to interview you, a member of the Beginner Photography Podcast community, to learn more about you, your struggles, and why you love this crazy thing that we do called photography. Now, today I am interviewing Mason Tierney. As many of you know about our community's transition from Facebook to our own private community platform, one that is free of ads, one that is free of politics, and one that is free of just the noise that you get from social media. When I had first started building it, to ensure that I was building the right community for you and your needs, I sent out a survey asking you what you wanted to see in the perfect photography community. And I got more than 250 responses, which resulted in over 1,300 answers that I went over and read every single one individually. There were a handful of people whose answers stood out to me as I felt that they really had a good grasp on what a great community could be for us photographers. So I reached out to them to be a part of our community beta testers to try it out and give feedback on how it could be improved. And Mason was one of those beta testers. And from his time in the new community, I've got to know him a little bit better, to learn more about his thought process on how he shoots, which was really interesting. So I reached out to him to be on the show today and share it with you. I know that you're going to find it interesting as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get on into this interview with Mason Tierney. So my first question is, it's kind of a curveball. I just want to know, why don't you tell me who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah. So I am born in Australia, born and raised in Australia, but now living in Vancouver, Canada. I'm lucky enough to hold a dual citizenship, and I moved here 3.5 years ago. And at my day job that I do is I'm a landscape architect by day, and I do photography as a sort of a hobby that allows me to sort of push my own creative boundaries and ways to sort of, like imagine creatively and imagine stuff. That's part of my job, and I also do it as part of a hobby sort of thing.
The photography is part of your job, or the creativity is part of your job?
The creativity. But also my photography. I do a little bit of photography for my company in terms of like landscape architectural photography of work that we've done and that sort of stuff.
I see.
Yeah.
Did you move away from Australia because it was too hot?
If I'm being honest, that's definitely one of the reasons.
Really? That was just a joke. Is it really? Obviously, I've never been, but it looks amazing, and I'd love to go visit one day. Tell me, should I go, or should I say, should I pass?
It's beautiful.
Is it?
100%. You should definitely go.
Okay.
Where I'm from in Brisbane it gets quite humid in the summer. And so it's hot, it's humid, it doesn't cool down at nighttime. So you're lying in bed at night and you're sweating and it's just uncomfortable. And just having the dual citizenship, I was kind of just like, well, why not go and explore the world? Why not kind of see what else is in the world to offer?
Like snow.
Like snow.
How have you enjoyed that? Is that pretty rough?
No, actually, I really enjoy the snow.
Oh, that's fun.
I definitely enjoy the cold over the heat. And so I think Canada is a place I really enjoy living.
Mm-hmm. Did you get into photography after moving to Canada, or had you started back in Australia?
A little bit. I got into photography mostly when I got into Canada. However, I was sort of exposed to photography my entire childhood. My dad is super into photography. When he was in his like late teens, early 20s, he was shooting black and white film, developing it himself, then like color film and developing it himself. And then, so when I was a kid, we always had a camera around. He always had his Canon DSLR. Can't remember which model it was, but he always had it around. He'd take it on every sort of holiday. He's always taking photos and everything. And I had a few chances to play with cameras when I was in Australia. One I remember quite fondly. It was my dad and I used to do photography. Well, we used to do camping trips into central Queensland, into sort of the desert, and we'd be going 120 kilometers an hour down the highway. I don't know what that is in miles, sorry, but highway speed.
Sure.
And I'd be hanging off the back of his motorcycle with his Canon hanging around my neck, barrel resting on his shoulder, shooting up the highway, shooting cars going past, all these sorts of things, all on auto mode. I didn't know exposure from shutter speed from the time of day, but it was a blast and I really enjoyed it.
When you got those photos, like when you were looking at them, did you find that was your dad maybe walking you through how to look at them more critically, or it was just purely for fun?
It was purely for fun, I think. He gave me the camera and he just said, go wild and shoot whatever you see and whatever you think is interesting. Yeah, he wasn't trying to push me in terms of any critical or technical aspects. He just wanted me to have fun with a camera in my hands, I
So then
think.
when did that change for you?
That changed in end of 2020 when I bought my first camera. I bought a Sony A6000 and I read every blog under the sun about exposure triangle and all this sort of stuff. And I went out and was shooting predominantly, I would go to botanical gardens and I'd shoot flowers predominantly to just play around with aperture, depth of field, all that sort of stuff. And the other thing I'd shoot a lot of was moving water to practice long shutter speed. So those were kind of the two main things that I played around with when I first had my camera.
Was learning the exposure triangle and specifically getting into manual challenging for you? I mean, I know that you've had a lot of experience just with photography in general, but when you finally started taking control of the camera, was that a difficult process?
No, I don't think it was. I think taking photos of flowers is quite easy because they're stationary. So if you mess it up, it's kind of fine. And so one of the other experiences I had shooting with a camera in Australia was actually at a flower festival. And I bored my partner at the time because I spent hours standing in front of flowers taking photos, and she was like, "Can we go now?" But I think I just had sort of time with a stationary subject, and so jumping into manual mode in that way wasn't too daunting, I don't think, for me.
Yeah, the stakes weren't as high to get
No,
the right moment because
yeah,
if it's not going to move, you can just recreate it again and again. Okay, I
yeah.
gotcha. Well, then, what were some of those challenges that you had in the learning process of photography?
I think I had a lot of issues with being happy with my photos when I first started.
Hmm.
I liked my photos, but I always found that they were kind of lacking something. And at the time, I thought it was composition that I thought I couldn't compose my photos properly, which I think was partially true because I was just beginning and I was trying to just line everything up with the rule of thirds,
Sure.
and that's not always
The
not
best,
always
yeah.
the perfect rule. But I think it was also just a lot of things, a combination of not really knowing how to edit photos, not really knowing what makes a good photo in a way. Like I look at something and I think, oh, this would be a nice photo, and then I take it, and realistically now I wouldn't probably look at that scene twice. I'd look at it and go, ah, there's not really a photo there.
Hmm.
From this angle, that's a better photo over there. Something like that. So I'd go out and I'd take 300 photos and I'd come back and crawl through all the photos and then I'd be like, oh, like maybe one's okay. So I think having an eye for actually creating a scene was something that I struggled with for a while, and I think I'm still, working on that now.
Sure. Well, if it makes you feel any better, I think you'll always be working on it. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what's so hard and what is so awesome about photography. Like at the same time is that relatively quickly you can get into it and feel like you're making progress fast. But then as time goes on, it's just kind of the way that you start seeing the world and diving deeper into that, right? The I like things when they look like this or X situation and I'm going to photograph it that way. And then that's what makes it uniquely your own. So diving deeper into that is always the challenge and again makes it a ton of fun. So then tell me about, because you mentioned a lot about shooting flowers, moving water. Now you live in more of a downtown area, so you're shooting lots of street stuff. So was that just out of here I am, this is what I have to shoot, or were you actively trying to get into street photography?
It was, I think, more of I got a bit bored shooting flowers. Like I didn't have the macro lens, so if I wanted to dive into that level of photography, I didn't have the gear for that. I think at the time I just had a kit lens that came on the Sony, and I kind of got bored of the flower photography, and so instead of walking to the botanical gardens, I would just end up like walking downtown or walking in the neighborhood around my office at lunch break or whatever. And because I was doing that more and more, I just kind of dived more into street photography in that fashion because I just started to find it more interesting than the flowers.
Sure, sure. So, what about that? Because now you go from stationary flowers that you're photographing. If you mess it up, I'll try it again. To now everything in this frame is moving, and I have to work on timing. Was that challenging for you?
Yeah, it was challenging because it felt in a way like I was jumping backwards a little bit because I would go out for a day of shooting and I'd take all these photos and I'd think, oh, this is gonna be great. And then I come back and it's blurry or it was out of focus or whatever. And I'm like, ah, geez, this is rough slogging. So it was definitely challenging to make adjustments to the way I shoot to be able to react to a scene quicker. Like when I was shooting flowers and stuff like that, I would never have put auto ISO on. I was always just like, oh, no, I control. I think I got into a little bit of too much of I'm the master of my camera and I will control every setting and it will be what I want it to be when I take this photo.
Mhm.
To then move into something where, like you said, street's a lot more fast paced. You have to make concessions. You can't stand there and be like, oh, I want a shutter speed of this and I want my aperture to be this and my ISO has to be this to match. You don't really have that luxury in street photography. So I started to make things where like I'd shoot generally maybe more like an f6 or an f8 and I'd leave my aperture ISO on auto ISO and then I'd just shoot at things as they came up. And I think that made me react to things quicker and probably allowed me to take better photos.
So giving up a little bit of the control in your camera allowed you to develop the eye better? Is that right?
Yeah, I think it allowed me to develop my eye and react to things quicker. Because I didn't have to fiddle with my settings before taking a photo. I could just go, oh, boom.
Right. Do you still lean into that today? Do you find that because obviously I've seen some of your photos in the group here recently where specifically the photo I'm talking about with the swirling water, the slow shutter speed shot there. Do you think that this newfound ability to see and react quicker is helping you to achieve better shots in that scenario where it is more stationary? Does that question even make sense?
Um,
I feel like that was kind of all over the place.
yeah, I think, well, maybe this sounds a bit counterintuitive. By letting go of some of the control of my camera, it kind of almost makes me feel a bit more in control of my camera. But just like, instead of controlling the settings and looking at my light meter and everything, just going with it. And then, so if I think of like that shot, I think if I do see something like that, I have a bit more time to take that photo. I know that I can take things off auto and fiddle around with the settings to be how I want them to be. So just like it's allowed me to see, oh, I've got more time here or I don't have more time here. It's kind of given me more control with my camera to kind of let go of the control, if that makes sense at all.
It did because I mean, one of my favorite cameras is just my GoPro, purely because I'm not doing anything with it. I just kind of let it take over. And I agree, like being in that headspace of I'm the master of my camera and I'm in full control is totally different than saying I got this camera and we're going to see what it does today. And all that you do is look at the world around you, pre-visualize what a photo could be, and then just move the camera either closer or further away to your subject to create that image. You kind of have an idea of what that shot is going to look like in your head, but you don't fully know until you take the time to look at it. And there's something really rewarding about that because when you separate those two things, the technical side of making it a perfect exposure, and then the creative side of distance from your subject, composition, looking for light. It really lets you explore kind of both sides so that when the time comes, you can then use both those sides together if need be. And then it doesn't feel so much as I need to learn everything about this and everything about that to be able to combine them together. So yeah, I 100% understand what it is that you're saying and it's fun. But I want to know also then, because you also shoot film, your dad shot film, you shoot film now. Do you approach film photography different as well? Because one of the things that you hear often is that film forces you to slow down because you only have so many exposures. Do you feel like you're a different photographer when you're shooting film versus when you're shooting digital?
Yeah, I do. I have a few different film cameras, quite a few different film cameras, probably too many film cameras.
Not a thing. It's not a thing.
I've probably got two favorites to shoot with. One is the TLR medium format that you saw. That when I'm shooting with that, I feel completely the opposite from street in a way. Like it is completely manual. Like I've got my incident light meter, take the light reading, set my settings up. I find the composition, step to the right, step to the left, all that sort of stuff. And that's so much more slow, so much more contemplative, all that sort of stuff. So I feel completely different. But I think the scenes I shoot with that would be different, I feel. The scenes I go after would be different to when I'm downtown with my A7 III because I'm looking for more scenes where I can set myself up and wait for that shot on the street that I took that I uploaded the one that I did for the critique.
Hmm.
I set myself up and I waited for people to be moving past and a bus, and I feel like I wait a lot more when I have a film camera in my hands for what it is that I'm visualizing. And then I just hope that what I captured was what I visualized because obviously I can't see it until I finish the roll and send it off to be developed. But I feel like, yeah, when I use that, I'm a lot slower and a lot more methodical with my shooting. But then the other camera that I have, which is the second favorite camera that I love shooting with, it's a little Olympus Affinity point and shoot
Oh, okay.
film camera,
Hmm.
and it has a rangefinder, not a digital range, it's a completely just a hole in the side of the camera. It's like an old. It feels
Optical.
almost like it feels almost like shooting with a disposable.
Uh-huh.
Nice, no settings. It's auto expose, auto focus. A slide back the cover, line up the shot, take it, put it away. And I love shooting with that because then I feel like I'm more reactive with that because I can be more reactive with that. And I focus entirely on composition when I'm shooting with that camera.
Geez, man, it is so interesting to think about already not only the technical side, but then the creative side, right? Separating shooting full manual versus shooting on a camera with no controls, but then also taking that aspect and applying it to film, where when you shoot full manual, you're much more intentional and conscious about the photo that you're taking. But then you take your Olympus camera, which essentially removes all of that control, and still you have to be intentional, but just in a different way. My gosh, do you find one of those four aspects more rewarding than the other three?
I think I go through phases. I just go through a period where, like, at the moment, I've picked up my TLR and I've been shooting that for a few weeks, and I've been like, oh, this is just, why don't I shoot with this more? This is great.
Right?
But then I went out for a walk the other day and I was like, oh, I don't feel like taking a full camera. So I just chucked my Olympus in my pocket. And then I was like, ah, this is great. Why don't I shoot with this more? And then I'm probably gonna be doing some hikes this weekend or something. So I'll probably take my A7 III and I'll be shooting with that. And I'm like, no, this is great. Why don't I do this more? So I think I go through these phases where I pick up one aspect and I run with it for a month.
Hmm.
And then I pick up the next aspect and I go, oh, this is great. And I run
Oh.
with that for a month. So I kind of just rotate. I think I don't prefer one over the other. I enjoy them all.
Do you ever have the decision fatigue of like, ooh, I know that I would like to shoot with this camera, but maybe the rest of the situation doesn't necessarily lend itself to this, and I should probably bring a digital camera or anything like that? Do you go through that?
I used to, and not even that long ago, I definitely used to. I'd go on a hike and I'd bring three cameras, six lenses, all these sorts of things, and
My
then
gosh.
I'd get to a place and I'm like, ah, okay, I'll take a shot with this one, and then I'll change my lens, and I'll take a shot with this one, and then I'll take a shot with this camera, and then I kind of got to the point where I was like, I'm sick of carrying all this stuff around, and so I think that kind of changed when I bought a 24 to 70 my A7 III, and since buying that, when I take my digital camera, I only take that lens. I don't bring any
Hmm.
other lens with me. I only bring that lens with me because that's I
It's a
mean
workhorse.
it's a work and it's the G Master lens, so it's like this big and this round. It's
Yeah.
huge and it's
19
heavy. And I'm like, I don't
pounds. Yeah.
yeah. I was like, I don't want to carry anything else. This is enough.
Yeah.
Especially when I started to like use that and see how powerful that lens was. I'm like, oh well, if 70 mil isn't really close enough and I can't physically get any closer, I can crop this
Hmm.
by like 50% and the quality is still fantastic.
Yeah.
So I kind of seeing that I could do that, I kind of let the fatigue go a little bit. And I was just started to be like, okay, I'm going out and I'm only going to take this camera.
Wow.
And if there's a shot that I see that I can't get for whatever reason, I can just come back another day with a different camera.
Mm. I wish I was that creatively free. I struggle so much with trying to decide which camera is going to be the best. But also, I guess I paint myself into a corner more often than I should. One, because I just love to shoot with primes. And I think that it's because they're just more compact than a zoom lens,
Yeah.
as you know. And I don't like the idea of bringing a big camera out and everybody like looking at me like, what's that guy doing bringing a camera? So I give myself prime lenses because they're smaller and then they just don't take up as much attention, I suppose. But then the trade-off is flexibility, being able to shoot in a wide scenario of things. And I would love to have some sort of compact zoom option, but it's just like any sort of zoom that is worth anything is just going to be very expensive because the optical
Yeah.
quality needs to be there. It's got to be glass. It has to, all these things. And then it's big. So I just bring too many cameras with me places, and
I
it's a problem.
I definitely feel that the more I shoot street, the more I feel self-conscious about using the workhorse that I have,
Yeah.
which is why actually I feel like sorry, I feel like I enjoy shooting street with the Olympus more, just
Hmm.
because it is so compact, and shooting with that has made me want to find a digital equivalent.
Right.
And I'm looking at so many different cameras at the moment. I've got a bad case of gear acquisition syndrome. I think I got my eyes on a Fuji X-T30
Oh,
and
wow.
maybe getting like a 35 mil pancake
Yeah.
and taking that with me as like a more discreet option.
You're going to love it when you do it, first of all. Yeah, the X-T30 is an amazing camera. Build quality, the image quality is amazing. Having a nice small lens, also great. But then again, you're going to run into that situation of the flexibility of like being able to do all these things. And kind of like you're saying, like, I wish that I had a smaller version of this Olympus. I recently picked up a Canon G7X Mark, whatever it is, 3, I think,
Hmm.
because all of these reviews were like great pocket camera, amazing image quality, manual controls. It's great. You're going to love this thing. And for a while, I had an X70, a Fuji X70. It was very much a pocketable camera that you could put into your pocket. It just had a 18 millimeter lens on it. There was no zoom, nothing like that. It had a little flip screen, and it had a full APS-C size sensor in there, which it was amazing for how small this camera was. And it was
Yeah.
my favorite camera, I think, ever. Unfortunately, as it aged, Fuji never updated it, and therefore it became very hard to autofocus with that camera, especially with kids for the type of photography that I was doing. That's when I got the G7X Mark II. And I can tell you, man, it's just like all you do is you compare these two things. It's now I can zoom, but the image quality is nowhere near what it was with the Fuji X70. I ended up buying, I actually have it right here next to me, this $5 Sony point and shoot camera. This thing literally came out in 2012. Some guy on Facebook Marketplace was selling it. And I thought, if I just had a camera that I could just put in my pocket, image quality isn't a huge deal, but if I could just put it in my pocket and take it with me everywhere. Did you hear that? Look how bad that sounds.
Yeah.
So bad. I think it's a 26 to like 150 lens. Like it has a good range, but the sensor it's from like 2011
Yeah.
or 2000 and
Back when they used to put the megapixel on the front like it was a boat. So like this is an 8 megapixel
yeah.
camera.
In fact, I took off that sticker, which now I wish that I didn't. Yeah, of course. Yeah. But I will say that it has been really fun to walk around and shoot with because even though there's no controls, just having a little bit of an additional reach and it not being a cell phone is a different thing. And it's really interesting just how different your camera can influence how you shoot and what it is that you shoot in that situation. And I find that this $5 Sony from whatever it is, 2009 or something like that, I enjoy more than the Canon G7X Mark III or whatever that cost, well, literally, I don't know, 300 times the price or something like
Yeah.
that.
I was looking originally at the Fuji X100 series.
Oh, yeah. Good luck right
And
now.
oh well, yeah, that's because one of my mates has an original X100 and he says it's great camera, fantastic camera. But like the X100V costs more than my A7 III
Well, right now it
right
does
now.
because the demand has been,
Popularity.
yeah,
Yeah.
so amazing. And I know that I just said that the X70 was like my favorite camera ever, but the X100V, when I had it, made me feel like my most creative version of myself. I don't know how to really like go deeper into that. I don't know why it was. And like an idiot, the only reason why I sold it was because I would find myself in situations where sometimes I didn't just want the 35 millimeter lens, but I wanted an 85 as well. So to do that, I would have to take my X Pro 2 along with me. And then now I had two cameras, and I'm like,
Yeah.
why don't I just carry the X Pro 2? It's the same size, and then I just need the two different lenses. But it's not the same. I'm telling you, if Fuji makes an X100, whatever the next version is, it's not going to be a V, but anyway, whatever that next version is, if it had like a teleconvert an optical
Mm,
teleconvert like filter that you can put inside, like a TLR sometimes. You can just press a button and it flips down, and now you have that 85. I would never want another camera ever. I would literally sell all of my other cameras because that would be the only camera that I would need, I think, for the rest of my life. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see. But I would highly encourage you to get one if you can. At least get your hands on it because it's a unique experience for sure. So, do you feel like there's an area of your shooting style that is missing or could be complemented better by a different camera in the way that you shoot? Is that why you're looking at an X100?
yeah, I think so. I love shooting with my A7 III, and it produces fantastic images.
Of course.
Like most, pick up any full frame mirrorless these days, and even and to be honest, like 99% of ASPC sensors as well.
Mm-hmm.
And you take a photo with them, and the image quality is fantastic. There's no two ways about that. But I find sometimes when I'm shooting with my Sony, it feels a bit sterile. Like there's no fun in the body of the Sony, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I pick up something like my Olympus and it just feels because I've got no control over anything. Maybe that's just it. But I just feel 10 times more creative. And when I'm walking around, I feel more excited about photography compared to when I have just my Sony. And maybe I'm just getting too excited about new gear and I need to just take a step back and focus on shooting with my Sony. Yeah, I think if I had a different camera that maybe is smaller and allowed me to be more creative, then I think that would get me a little bit more excited about street photography. I feel like sometimes I feel like, oh, another day of street photography. Okay. Um, yeah, I feel that.
Why is that so important to you? Because if you have these two other cameras, at least with the TLR and the Olympus, where you do feel that creative inspiration, why is it important for you to also have that in the Sony?
Because film is expensive. That's the main reason. And yeah, paying for rolls of film and then getting them developed and then either having them scanning them or me taking the process of take a couple hours, then take photos of all my film and then flip them all into the right thing. It's just a time-wise expensive or wallet expensive experience.
Mm-hmm.
And if I bought a digital camera that gave me that feeling, eventually the cost of the film would become more than the camera,
Ah.
is what I'm looking at. And I kind of go, oh, geez, like I'd rather put that money towards going somewhere on a trip than, yeah.
Do you think that just the fact that it is film lends itself to that creative feeling that you're looking for? I guess, do you think that that limitation that you only have so many shots and that it costs X amount per shot and that forces you to be more intentional, do you think that it's possible to achieve that creative feeling that you're looking for when shooting film, but on digital without those restraints of film?
I hope so.
Of course.
I think that's what I'm trying to find out at the moment
Mm,
is whether I get a digital camera that can give me that creative feeling of similar to when shooting with film.
mhm,
I mean, my ideal camera, and I often think about this, would be something like the Affinity Olympus. I mean, that's relatively small. I'm okay with 35mm focal length, I think. I never really shot 35mm focal length until I picked up the Olympus, and having that prime limitation, I think I quite enjoy that focal
mhm,
length.
mhm,
I don't really care about whether I see the image. I'm happy, like if I had thinking my dream camera, if it didn't have an LCD screen on the back, so I didn't really know what the photos came back until I came back home and uploaded them, that would be totally fine. But something that I think ideally has like two modes, like a juiced up auto mode and then a manual mode where maybe I can just control a few of the settings, or maybe it's aperture priority or something, and I can just turn it on, take a photo, put it away, put it back in my pocket. That'd be like my ideal camera, I think.
You just perfectly described the X100V. That's the X100V right there.
Yeah.
That's that camera. Or I was going to say the X Pro 3, because then you can flip the camera or the screen up and not see the screen whatsoever, but it's not as pocketable.
It's not as pocketable, yeah.
Not as pocketable. Do you love the act of photography or the result of the image that you're able to achieve more in this ecosystem of photography?
I think it's been on what I'm shooting in a way. I think the other two aspects of photography that I really enjoy are landscape photography and astrophotography. When I'm out in a beautiful natural place hiking around, it's hard not to enjoy photography because everywhere you look, something's beautiful and you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And astrophotography, I think it's magical, astrophotography.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think I enjoy the act of photography of those things a lot, but I also really enjoy editing photos.
Hmm.
So I think I really enjoy taking photos and I really enjoy bringing them back and uploading them and then seeing the photos that I took and then editing them and pushing them to potentially what I saw in my mind or pushing them maybe a little bit beyond and seeing that result as well. I think both aspects bring me lots of joy.
Did you find editing was a difficult process to learn? When you're used to being a kid and just pointing, shooting, and then you're done, was editing a big hurdle for you?
No, I don't think it was. I think I'm quite, well, I guess at first it was just because I was playing around with sliders and I'd often push saturation too far and
Always.
contrast too far and all those sorts of mistakes that probably everyone makes in the beginning. But I think I pick up programs and technology relatively quickly. So I think I've enjoyed editing and I find the process of editing not too difficult, particularly now I can push and pull photos in sort of multiple different directions. What I do struggle with editing is, I guess, what it is my style and what is it that I want to push and pull about this photo to make it mine and mine alone in a way.
What have you discovered so far?
I have discovered lots of different things. So I've played around and I've bought a few different presets from photographers that I like. And I've played around with the presets and I discovered that I didn't really like presets because it felt like not cheating, but I enjoy editing. So then to go in and click a preset and then slide the temperature a little bit and maybe boost the greens, something like that, it didn't feel like editing. It wasn't what I enjoyed about editing. I didn't like presets. I tried also different like creative styles of muted, dreamy styles and high contrast, poppy styles. But I think I lean to more, just a little bit more realistic, slightly saturated colors, dark shadows is like, I think what I kind of lean towards, particularly in like landscape photography.
Well, it sounds to
Whereas,
me like you have the start of a style right there.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
what is it about your images that you wish were more you?
Sometimes I find when I'm editing the photos, and maybe it speaks more to the quality of the photo than the quality of the edit or whatever. But I find when I edit a photo sometimes, and I think it's going to be great, and I get back and I edit it how I think it's going to look good, I kind of get a little bit bored looking at the photo, and that's happened a couple times, which just discouraged me slightly. But then I think, well, maybe this isn't a good photo, and maybe that's just the reality of the photo, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I think playing around with the presets and some of the more dreamy, softer sort of styles, in my experience, I felt has lifted some of my photos to a quality that they didn't have, if that makes sense. Like when I edited them in a bit more of a more realistic, slightly saturated, a bit more contrast, dark shadows, they just didn't feel interesting. And I think that probably speaks to more just the quality of the photo, I think.
Sure, I see. And just over time, not only is your shooting style going to change with subject matter and just the technicals of how you shoot, but also your editing style is going to change as well. Just those personal tastes as you become more aware of different edits and styles of photography as well to explore. So I say just keep exploring. I mean, that's really the only way. It's so hard to teach somebody a style or teach somebody how to see photographically because really the only answer is just to do more of that thing and discover it for yourself and figure out, well, do I like this or do I not like this? And then just kind of continue down that path for sure. But I want to switch gears here and now talk to you a little bit about the new community because our new beginner photography podcast community you've been a part of for a while. You're one of our beta testers and you came over from Facebook as well. Tell me kind of your thoughts. I reached out to you specifically because you filled out the survey that I sent out a number of months ago asking you like what the perfect photography community looked like. Could you kind of tell me a little bit more about what pain points you were having in terms of using photo groups on Facebook and what you wanted more from them?
Yeah. So I was part of, and I've left most of them now. I was part of a bunch of different photography groups on Facebook and stuff. And one of them was, yeah, like you mentioned, I was part of the Beginner Photography podcast group, which I think was probably one of the better groups. Other groups I found people post photos, either inspiration photos or their own photos or whatever. And I found that the comment section could get quite nasty on
Mm,
some photos. Like
hmm.
they'd be like, "Oh, I really like the editing on this photo. Any pointers on how to achieve this look or a similar look would be appreciated." And then there'd be scores of people in the comments just being like, "Why do you want to achieve this look? It's boring, it's drab, and there's too much brown."
Oh, wow.
And it's kind of like, shut up. Like, if this person wants to achieve that, just let them help them get there.
Of course.
Definitely, I think that one of the things I really liked about the beginner photography podcast group on Facebook was that it was much nicer than a lot of the other groups I was part of. But then I also found, and maybe it's just due to the size, is that you'd post something there, and sometimes it would get a lot of attention and a lot of comments, and you'd get help or whatever. And other times we'd kind of get lost in the mess. And I think that's why I became a little bit less active on the group because it just felt like I was one of the masses and getting lost. So that's why I felt like I stepped back from the group because of that. So then when you sent out the survey, I was like super excited that we might have something that was off Facebook because algorithms are really painful.
Yes.
And so yeah, I was really excited for something that would be feel like more of a community and that everyone, not just myself, but everyone would have their photos or their questions and their comments seen and get help.
So then when it comes to time to, when I sent you this invitation, I told you a little bit about the new community. There's several parts of a new community or any community, right? It's the people who are in it. And obviously the people of the Beginner Photography Podcast Facebook group, they're friendly people, right? And I found that they genuinely want to help others. But like you said, once it reaches some sort of level, you start to feel more like just being part of a mass of people, on top of having a platform that is designed to boost the posts that are doing good and suppress the posts that don't immediately start getting attention. How do you think the new group is going to be better for the community in that aspect?
I think the way that I think that the fact that it's broken down into these groups is probably helping that a lot. I find instead of looking at Instagram or something like that on my lunch break, I boot up the app and there'll be, especially now that there's a bunch more people on the app, there'll be like 5 new posts on the landscapes, and there'll be 3 more posts on the gear and 6 posts on the editing or whatever. And I scroll through them on my lunch break, and I find it more enjoyable to look at than social media. And I think that because the algorithm isn't boosting and suppressing posts, I think everyone will just have their voice heard more. And I feel like I see it, even though I guess we're in the early steps. I see that more people are answering questions. There's usually like a bunch of comments underneath questions or photos or whatever. And so it feels like this is already better than Facebook, that like people are asking questions and getting answers. And I think that it'll just lead to, yeah, a much better environment that'll allow people to grow as photographers, I think.
I really hope so. I really hope so. That's the goal. It's never really been about like the money aspect of it, because I know that everybody has questions. I know that I had questions when I first started, and just having a place where you can come and know that you can get an answer from people who are friendly and supportive is really valuable. So
Yeah.
that I'm super excited about, to like actually see progress being made, and not just, it's become very easy to just post something real quick because we're on social media, and that's how you interact on social media. You give a quick like, you give a quick, oh, that's cool, or oh, that's interesting, or congratulations. And very rarely do people go deeper than that. And I feel like this community, we're really trying to highlight that aspect. Well, how
Yeah.
can you help others? Like, how can your response help others? How can your question help others? How can your experience also help others and still get you the help that you need as well? And I really hope that that is exactly what the community evolves into. And right now, I think it looks like that is the direction that it's going. But you're also part of the Coach Capture Critique Collective, which is one of the longest alliterations of a title I've ever come up with. And it can be difficult at times. Tell me your thoughts on that. Why did you join, and how's it been so far?
I joined because I think having critical, especially real-time, constructive critical feedback is super beneficial. And that's something that I've been looking for a while. I've joined other groups. I won't name any names, but I've joined other sort of websites and groups and stuff like that that say that you'll get feedback and all this sort of stuff. And then you join like the free version or even the bottom tier, and they're like, oh, well, if you want the live critique, you actually have to join the top tier. And then it's like hundreds of dollars a year, and you may get chosen to be on the weekly podcast or wherever, where we talk about the photos and other sorts of things. And other groups where I felt like I've had pressure for a weekly deadline, which I think is too short for me. So to be part of the capture,
Coach,
yeah, the
Capture
CCCC,
Collective. See, yeah.
yeah, where we have a month, which gives you a chance, I think, to with the subject for the month to really go out and explore and shoot that subject way better than a week. Like in a week, I feel like I have two, maybe three opportunities to go out and play with that sort of style. But with a month, that gives me 8, 12, so many more opportunities to really play with that style and delve into that style. So I really like that aspect of it. I really like when we come together on Zoom and we have that meeting with everyone and we all talk about the photos. We can all offer a bit of our 2 cents on the photos. That real-time constructive criticism is, I think that's the best way to become a better photographer, better at anything, not just photography, better at anything is to be able to get constructive criticism feedback and be able to apply that as well, which I think is what the CCCC allows.
Now that you've gone through 2 months, 2 different themes, do you feel like the different themes have changed the way that you shoot or just pushed you in a new direction while you're out shooting? I guess what I'm trying to get at is, do you feel like it's expanding your photographic view of photography in the way that you shoot?
Yeah, 100%. Maybe I shouldn't do this, but when I go out and shoot, I don't generally I don't go out and shoot with like a particular thing in mind. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go shooting leading lines today or something like that because I guess maybe I just don't like to like constrict myself to just be like, oh, just this. So to have a theme that is this month it's dark as possible. Last month was long exposure. To have that kind of in the back of my mind, like, oh, I gotta be looking out for I'm not necessarily focusing on this, but I'm looking out for opportunities to push myself with different styles that I may not play with. Like I've never really played with low key or dark as possible styles of photography before. So that's opened my eyes to new photographic avenues. Yeah, not in a way that I feel pressured to do it. So I think I really enjoy that aspect of it.
Cool. That's the goal, obviously, is I hope that each theme gives you, just kind of broadens your tool belt, I guess you could say.
I also wouldn't care if you just came out and said, this is the theme every month. But by voting for it, it feels like we're part of a community. Like we're deciding what's happening.
And that's good, right?
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good. It can be challenging at times because I'm like, I don't know what they're going to choose. What is it going to be? What am I going to have to go out and shoot this month? But I find that excitement is really enjoyable too. Mason, I know that we're coming to the end of our time here. I wanted to obviously say thank you for not only coming on here today, especially after yesterday, me completely screwing up our times. And, you were gracious enough to come back and make this happen, but also being a part of the community and being a part of the new community and coming back and giving us another chance and getting in there and really being helpful, not only to get the information that you need, but helping out others as well. We just need more people like you in the world who are genuinely helpful. So I want to say thank you for that. And I know that listeners are going to be wondering, well, I know that we can find Mason in the new community, but where can we see some of his photos? So can you share with us where we can find you online?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. My handle is mason.tierney, but it's spelled Tierneyy. Put an extra Y on because the one without the single Y was taken. And I guess I can soft launch it on here. I'm soft launching a Cloud Spot gallery.
Nice.
I think I sent you the link, but I'm playing around with that. And so I'm going through and putting up my photos on there as well.
Well, I will be sure to put links to both of those in the show notes. And whoever the other Mason Tierney is, I bet you're a much better photographer than him. So
thanks.
Again, Mason, thanks so much for coming on. And I look forward to keeping up with you in the group. And I can't wait to see your photo for the As Dark as Possible challenge because it's going to be a good one. It's going to be unique for sure.
Thanks, Ram. Yeah. Awesome. It's been a pleasure.
Remember, this Community Spotlight series is all about you and the supportive Beginner Photography podcast community. Now, if you would like to be a part of this all-new and private supportive community, we would love to have you. It's free to join, and you can find a direct link to the group in the show notes or by heading over to beginnerphotopod.com/group. Thank you again so much for listening, and remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoy the show, consider leaving a review in iTunes. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.